And a lot of times families would come in really not knowing what homeschooling was going to look like, but they knew they didn't like the remote learning that had happened the year before in the spring. And it made us feel good when we were able to help them see a path, to help them kind of go, okay, we can do this. Yep, we can make this work. And it's been rewarding through the year. We've had a number of families who have told us, we would have never homeschooled without the pandemic. We really hadn't considered it. We really like this. It's really worked well for our families. We're going to keep homeschooling.
Well, in just a few moments, you're going to hear from Rich Bartolowits, the principal of Connections Homeschool, which is on the beautiful Kenai Peninsula in the beautiful state of Alaska. It's a homeschool charter school, and just the dynamic of homeschooling in Alaska is completely different than the rest of the United States. So we dive into that a little bit about kind of allotments and what you can use some of the funds for as a homeschooler in Alaska. We talk marketing, and we just talk Alaska. It's a fun one. I'm sure you're going to have fun with it. Alaska is close and near and dear to my heart. And if you haven't visited, FYI, you need to. It's beautiful. So I won't talk anymore. We'll jump right into the podcast here in just a few moments on the Finally Marketing That Works podcast. Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Finally Marketing That Works podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Rich Bartolowits. He is the principal of Connections Homeschool in the beautiful city of Soldotna, Alaska. Rich, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing just great, Mitchell. Thank you. It's just another beautiful spring day. Well, no, actually, it's kind of dreary outside, but it's a beautiful day in Alaska always.
Perfect. And summer's coming. I know we're filming this here in the springtime in May, but summer, that warm weather's coming and that all the snow piles will be gone here soon, I'm assuming, right?
It's, yeah, I've just got a couple feet in front of my Jeep out there. I had to put the tires up a little bit on the snow this morning just for fun, but I give it the end of the week and we should be done with all the snow banks.
This whole time I've known you, I actually didn't know you had a Jeep. Is it a Jeep Wrangler?
It's an old Wrangler. It's 2005. It's my toy. When I quit riding a motorcycle, I decided I needed to get a four-wheel motorcycle. So that's my toy vehicle.
I'm a little jealous because I am a Jeep fan. Only Jeep Wranglers, not really a Jeep Cherokee fan or Liberty. I love them Jeep Wranglers and the good old Jeep Wave. Which does everybody in Alaska do the Jeep Wave? Okay, I'm guessing I'm good. My fun, quick side story is my wife's family who lives in North Carolina. They have I think it's an 05 or 06 white Jeep Wrangler. Super fun because you can take the top down and all that stuff with it. And I was driving it and I was like, I told my wife, I was like, all these people keep waving at me and I don't know them. And she's like, you're not waving back at them? And I was like, no. And she goes, and then I learned about the whole Jeep Wrangler wave. And I was really envious going, I kind of want a Jeep Wrangler now just for the Jeep wave. But yeah, that's a pretty cool thing you guys have in common with all the Jeep Wranglers.
Yeah, it actually helped me, when I quit riding a motorcycle, because when you're riding your bike down the road, you have a similar little hand gesture to your fellow bike riders. So the Jeep Wave kind of was a nice transition for me there when I quit riding a bike.
So is the bike the one where I see their hands go down to their side?
Yeah, a lot of times it's down to the side just because that's a little bit safer than going up high. But yeah, it's just kind of a subtle little thing with the bike riders. But the Jeeps, now unfortunately some people with Jeeps and those Liberties and stuff like that, they think they should be doing it too. But it's really a Wrangler Wave, and with my impact orange, it's easy to see me coming.
Oh man, I'm jealous. So I have a random question about the bike thing. So do Harleys do it to crotch rockets, and do crotch rockets do it to Harley people, or is it a universal bike thing?
It's pretty universal. Harley riders are a little bit in a class of their own, but yeah, they usually talk to us peasants, and give us the little signal there.
Okay, cool. I don't own either, so I have no idea. But maybe one day. I know my wife said I can never have a bike because she wants me to come home alive. So. But very, very cool. So, well, I know you got an awesome summer ahead. You're going to have a good break from school and then probably a really busy fall, as I know we're still battling this pandemic and closures, and some states are opening, but I know it's still very heavily school involved in schools right now. So I know you're principal, of course, of this huge homeschool school in Soldotna. So how have you guys kind of adapted during this change? I know kind of, okay, setting the field a little bit. 2020, COVID happens. People obviously freak out. Their kids, the schools are closed. They enroll with you guys. How have you guys seen and adapted to that change, that quick change in Alaska for people going from the public school system going in person to being remote? Kind of leave it open. We'll have a good open discussion about it. But what have you guys seen?
Yeah, well, it was definitely a shock. We expected there to be an increase in interest in homeschooling. We did not accurately anticipate just how large that interest would be. We're a program that over the past few years, we've been going up a little bit in enrollment. We were at about close to 900 at the end of the previous year. We enrolled 1,000 people in August and September of this last school year. A large number of them were new to homeschooling. At one point this year, we hit over 1,900 students enrolled with us. About a quarter of the school district was enrolled with our program. We cover a pretty large geographic area. The Kenai Peninsula Borough School District runs from Homer at the southern end to Seward up at the northern and I guess eastern side, and so that's about 100. No, what is that? About 200 miles apart. We're larger than some states, and so that was spread across our program. All those students essentially more than doubled in size, and so we were scrambling at the beginning of the school year to get additional staff members because with our homeschooling program, every family has a teacher assigned to them to support and give advice. And so for a while there, I did have one teacher who enrolled 285 people before she got relief and split families off to new people. But we just hit the ground running and reminded ourselves that we're doing a service to families, and a lot of times families would come in really not knowing what homeschooling was going to look like, but they knew they didn't like the remote learning that had happened the year before in the spring. And it made us feel good when we were able to help them see a path, to help them kind of go, okay, we can do this. Yep, we can make this work. And it's been rewarding through the year. We've had a number of families who have told us, we would have never homeschooled without the pandemic. We really hadn't considered it. We really like this. It's really worked well for our families. We're going to keep homeschooling, and that's certainly not universal, because there are other families who are telling us that we now see that teachers deserve raises, and our kids are animals, and we cannot wait till they go back to school. So there's definitely both sides of that, but yeah, a number of people going, yeah, this is really working for us. This is good for our family.
Man, I know it's a totally different dynamic in Alaska for homeschooling than it is in other states. I'm obviously biased and partial because I was, up there from Alaska in the Mat-Su Valley in the town of Wasilla. So different dynamic out there, but I was homeschooled my entire life, never went to truly public school. And Alaska is just its own little beast, I feel like, with homeschooling. So I'd love to, for those that are listening and don't really know the dynamic for Alaska, I'd love if you could share kind of how does Alaska, how are we different than the lower 48, of course, as we call it in Alaska? How are we different from every other state for homeschooling?
Yeah, so Alaska does things differently. Essentially, Alaska years ago said parents have the right to educate their children. And they can do that independently, and they don't have to report to anybody. They can just say, I want to homeschool my children, and they do that. But we also said that school districts could set up, in the legislation, it's called correspondence schools, but we all call them homeschool programs, where students and families enroll with a public school. So Connections is a public school in the Kenai Peninsula Borough School District. And through that mechanism, we are able to give an allotment for the family to use on educational materials and services. And then also the family has to agree that, okay, yeah, we're going to follow the district's curriculum. Now, when I say the curriculum, I don't mean the material. I mean, these are the subjects that we have to learn, like when we get into high school. These are the credits that we have to earn. But the families really still have a lot of choice, pretty wide open choice on what they use to study those subjects. So it's a public school. They get a public school diploma. We're fully accredited. I've gone through well, it used to be advanced ed. Now it's called 𝗥𝗶𝗰𝗵 accreditation. So it's an accredited place. We're in the NCAA clearance house, as you know, as an accredited place. But it's different. Usually when we're trying to deal with curriculum providers and we tell them how things work in Alaska, they're confused for quite a while. Wait, you're a public school, but you said you were a homeschool. Which is it? So yeah, it is a different animal here. But the state of Alaska said, hey, we respect parents' right to make the choices for their kids, and that's what we try to do, is support parents as they make those choices and give them advice when they need some.
I love that. And one of the things I loved most about being homeschooled is I could be homeschooled and still play public school sports at the local high school. So I was big into football, so played football for middle school and high school, but I was still homeschooled the whole time. So, and you know, back in the day, you know, I was the quarterback of the high school football team, and it was so funny going to these games, and you know, you announce the team, and we were like, who the heck is Mitchell Slater? I don't know who that is. All the kids didn't know who the guy was who was playing quarterback, which is just so funny because I was homeschooled. I'd show up for practice when school got out. As soon as practice got over, I went home and I was very to myself, but that was just a different dynamic. But I loved that. And I also loved the allotment that the state of Alaska was able to provide that we could use for school supplies or a computer. I remember specifically one of the biggest ones I did was I bought a fly tying kit. It's like a $300 fly tying kit, but I wanted to learn that for one of my school subjects or whatever it was. And so I bought this fly tying kit, learned how to tie flies, and used it for fly fishing. And I was so cool to be able to do that and catch a trout on a homemade fly that I had made in class. Like, that was so cool. So I love that the state of Alaska gives that ability for students to be able to have that. So I know you've been doing this for a while. I know you're only like 31 years old, 32 years old, you know, probably give or take a little bit, but
very experienced 31 years old.
Okay, you look great. I mean, I think you have more hair than I do, so you're already doing better in that department.
Yeah, it's pretty white.
So in your years of being in school and being a principal, I'm sure you've seen some interesting purchases with the allotment. I know you can't just go out and buy a Ferrari with it, of course, but what are some of what do you think the coolest stories, the coolest things you've seen purchased with the Alaska allotment?
Boy, there has been some interesting ones, and you know, those interesting ones we have to prove separately, and so the question will come up, hey, what do you think about this? And there's been a lot of items that at first I've said, yeah, no, that, and then I start to thinking about it. One that was really fun, and it was actually a class. It was expensive, but the end product of the class was a canoe paddle. But it was taught by a native elder, so it was an art form, and they made the paddles in the traditional way, and so it was a cultural, hands-on, historical. It was really a cool product or a project that came out with a paddle. So, you know, looking at it, it's like, wow, you're going to spend that much on a paddle? And it's like, well, not really spending it on the paddle. That's the outcome, but I would love to have the paddle that the student made. Another one that was really interesting was a very expensive pair of cross-country skis. And when it first came across my desk, I said, well, of course not. But it turns out this family they have a website. I can't remember the name of the website right now, but they are trekkers. Like, they have trekked the Aleutian Islands.
Wow.
And they were getting ready for I believe it was a 1,000-mile ski trek. Well, your typical pair of $100 skis isn't going to be appropriate for that kind of a ski trip. And So these students, and these were young students, elementary age students, but they trekked. Now, I don't think you have to stretch too far to just think about the learning that would go on something like that.
For sure.
From science to physical education to geology. I mean, and they wrote about it as well. So it was a great learning activity, but something that it was outside the norm.
So all right, both of those are awesome. So now, what is the funniest one that you've had to deny? Like you truly just had to deny it. What's the craziest one? There's got to be something that's just laughable that you've had come across your desk.
Oh boy, there's a few that I laugh about. I think it's laughable, and everybody here thinks it's laughable. But people wanting to purchase or rent firearms for a firearms training class. We are a public school. I'm sorry, we just can't do that. I will pay for the firearms class.
Okay, good.
Because that's legitimate instruction. But no, I can't buy a student a gun.
Yeah.
And then, something else that should be said about the allotment, when it is equipment and things like that, the school district owns it. Now, if it's worn out, like that pair of skis after 1,000 miles, yeah, I don't really have a use for that. But if someone buys a guitar to learn guitar, that guitar comes back to the program when they're done using it. So it's not giving them money. It's giving them money that they can use on things, but then that stuff belongs to the school district.
Okay, fair. No, it's good. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, it's not like I'm going to move to Alaska, get all this free money to buy whatever I want to go to school. There's different amounts. Of course, every district is different. So thank you for making that point. So in this, I'd love to get some of your background. Again, I know you've been doing this for a while. You've seen a lot of things that I'd love to get your take on. So when you first were principal, or even before you were a principal, how did you guys market your school then, and then kind of how have you seen marketing it now? What's worked and what hasn't? I'd love to get kind of that, I guess the evolution is the word for it, the evolution of marketing for you. What have you seen in the years you've been in this?
Well, I'm pretty sure this is my 6th year with the program, and marketing when I started here really consisted of advertising in newspapers and the occasional radio ad. And really, it's continued like that for the last 4 to 5 years. Of course, we had a website. I guess 5 or 6 years ago it was good, but it's pretty terrible 2 years ago. We had a Facebook account, didn't really use it much, so didn't really do any marketing with it. It was just there for a presence. So felt like we were pretty well floundering. And just going back to marketing, why we would need to market, one of the things, as we talked about earlier, the state thinking differently about homeschool programs, there are programs in the state that are statewide. So you don't have to, it doesn't matter where you live, our students can enroll in those districts that aren't on the Kenai Peninsula. We choose to only service students who live on the Kenai Peninsula. That was a choice that our district made. Okay. But we do have competitors who have offices on the Kenai Peninsula.
So you've seen obviously this huge shift, this change, where you were doing radio and TV. Not to say that you wouldn't use that anymore.
No TV. A little too small a market for that.
Oh, touche. But lots of radio and newspaper. I'm guessing, is newspaper still a big thing there on the peninsula even to this day? Is that a big advertising avenue?
Actually, no. Right now, I'm not doing a lot of advertising in the newspaper. I am in one publication, but one of the problems we had is not really knowing what was working. What was. I mean, all of those different things are expensive, and just putting money out there, if you don't know you're getting results, was really tough to justify.
Yeah, I got you. And now in this digital age, kind of how have you seen it in today's market? Of course, with digital, if we're doing everything good and right, you can kind of track and look at Google Analytics, for instance, and see, oh man, before we had that radio ad or before we did that ad on Facebook, we had, maybe 100 people visit our website. But after that, we had 1,000 people visit our website. So how have you kind of seen that shift where, man, there's a lot of trackability now we can have with our marketing?
Well, certainly that's one of the reasons we're working with you is didn't really understand a lot of that, and it has been helpful being able to track where people click on a website or where people look on the website. Starting to do some of the Facebook ads now, able to see how many people they reach and how many people react to them. Starting to do some of that experimentation. It's it still got a long way to go there to see what's working, and part of that are some internal changes we just need to make to ask people, okay, where did you hear about us?
Sure.
Of course, this year's been really interesting in that we got 1,000 students without advertising because everybody in the world was running to homeschool programs. So it's pretty hard to judge what advertising campaign. Yeah, we ran a radio ad in last July, but it's pretty hard to judge how much the radio ad generated leads and how much was just, oh my gosh, we need to find a homeschool program and here's a phone number.
Thankfully, you rank really well when people just Google homeschool Soldotna or homeschool, like you popped right up. And I'm assuming that was a very, very Googled term for the whole country, of course, when all that went down. I was like, what do we do? And I mean, I feel like everybody in Alaska was, in my opinion, I'm getting biased, but I feel like we're more prepared and taken care of in Alaska than probably any other state when it came to homeschooling. Now, remote learning, totally different ball game, but just the homeschooling in general, just Alaska was ready. I feel like ready for that. Besides running out of computers, which I know is an issue for a lot of the country, not being able to get computers because of the demand, and that's a whole different story, of course. But if for the marketing world, if you could put it into, I'd love to hear maybe your 3 biggest flops that you've had that you've seen. It could be from the last 6 years, or you could have seen it. This school tried this. Boy, that was the biggest waste of money or biggest waste of time that we tried to do for marketing. Now, of course, marketing, it's not just a radio ad or TV or billboard or anything like that. It could be, we put all this money into getting shirts made and nobody wanted them or wore them. Like, it could be, marketing is such a vast array of things. So do you have any, like, even if it was just one, a huge flop, and then maybe your 3 biggest successes that you've had?
Well, and I'll choose a flop from that actually happened before I was here, but the remnants were still here when I took this job. Logo. So having a branding tool. When I came here, there was an ongoing joke about the logo because they were laughable, the ones we had. So our logo was, we had a couple of them were being used. One was kind of okay. One they paid some money for to have it developed, and they took the sea of connections and made it kind of a moon shape, and everybody kind of came up afterwards and said, yeah, that's just like the Russian sickle. So the logos weren't very good, and I said that, okay, I would get a new logo. And unfortunately, they were designing logos by committee, and the committees could never come up with something. So finally, last year, I went rogue. I contacted a marketing agency, and I developed a logo with a committee of 1. So we actually were able to make the decisions. I did run it by a few people for a few last changes, but so that in itself, it took me 5 years to develop a logo that I'm happy with, and I think it's nice, and we're just starting to get that branding out there. So branding would be one of those things that was lacking from connections, and we're trying to get that going. And like you said, that's a part of that marketing, just always having that same logo. So yeah, we're starting to see Facebook and using it with ads. I'd say that's one of the successes we're starting to see, and you've helped out there in promoting, doing the boosts, as Facebook calls it, on ads, and seeing how many people get to look at it. Just tracking a new ad today, and it looks like, okay, some people are seeing it and actually clicking on a link. So getting some reaction, and that's good. I'm not sure how effective they are, but I do get people that comment on radio ads. You know, oh yeah, I heard the ad, and as we know from marketing, you're not necessarily giving a person a first time, but there is marketing that's keeping your name out there and getting your name out there. So if people are hearing the ads, it's good. I kind of like doing radio ads. I you know, my one of my guilty pleasures. I like being on the radio. It's kind of fun, and it's really fun when there's somebody editing it for you. And as you know, I've done play-by-play, and there's no editing on that one. But so it's fun going into the studio and recording an ad, and them getting to fix the mistakes that I made.
I'm sure play-by-play is easier because it just comes natural. You're just calling a play, you're having fun, you're enjoying a sport. The ad, it's like you're freaking out because you know people are recording you and you're looking at you. It's, I don't know.
Oh yeah, play-by-play is easy in the fact that, you know, since people can't see it, if you make a mistake, it doesn't really matter, because nobody saw except there are people in the stands that I've actually seen listening to the radio while they're watching the game, and that's kind of intimidating. And I've looked over at them before, and they look at me as I say something, and it's like, yeah, I know, I just messed up that bad, but but usually they can't tell if I'm making a mistake on the radio.
Oh, that's perfect. See, they edited the best editors in the world make you sound good. So if there's anybody listening to the podcast that lives on the peninsula and is looking to enroll, or maybe somebody just has a question with how you guys kind of run your school, what's probably the best way to get in touch? I know you obviously would never want to share your cell phone, but obviously your website link and maybe the general email that somebody could reach out to if you wanted to. What would you give them to contact you guys?
Well, you bet. So our website is 𝗥𝗶𝗰𝗵𝗿𝗱 That's Connections Homeschool Program, Kenai.org. And that's a good place to go. There's some general information, and there's a link on there for enroll, and that'll tell you exactly what you need to do. There's just a few steps to follow, a few pieces of paperwork, but it'll explain that process. Or you can just give us a call at 907-714-8880. That's our Soldotna office number, and we can, if you happen to be calling from Homer or Seward, we can patch you through to those offices by calling our number. But and actually that 𝗥𝗶𝗰𝗵, that was one of your ideas too. Get something shorter to put in, because we used to have about a 35-character web address, and people are starting to remember 𝗥𝗶𝗰𝗵.
Sweet.
And it may be a little bit harder initially than remembering what Connections is, but it's a lot easier to spell. 𝗥𝗶𝗰𝗵.org.
Perfect. Well, thank you for sharing that information. And on obviously a side note, thank you for what you do for these kids in your district specifically, and giving them a place to learn and to grow. I have such respect for teachers and for school administrators, because it's a job that I think takes a special person, and it's something I don't think I'd be really, really good at, but I'm glad there's people there that do an amazing job. So thank you for what you do. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Mitchell.
And thanks for hopping on the podcast. We'll close it out from here. But Rich, I hope you enjoy your summer. Like I said, the sunshine and warmth is coming, and best of luck to you in your school year in the fall. All right?
Yeah, no, it's summer's going to be coming. It's going to be fun, getting all ready to get revitalized for the next school year.
Because the snow's coming. All right. All right. I'll talk to you later, Rich.
All right. Thanks, Mitchell.
Well, if you're in charge of a school or you work at a school and you just finished this episode, I hope you were able to take at least one thing away from the episode today with Rich, and you can use that to use on your school to help it be better this coming year than it was this past year, because we're all trying to be better every single week, every single year, better than we used to be. Rich is an amazing principal and a great guy and a true Alaskan, and again, I hope you were able to take something away from the knowledge he shared with us today. We'll be back here next week with another new guest on another edition of the Finally Marketing That Works podcast. We'll see you then.